Hobbit by JRR Tolkien. Chapter 1. An Unexpected Party. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with ends of worms and oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole, painted green, with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened onto a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel. A very comfortable tunnel, without smoke, with paneled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats. The hobbit was fond of visitors. The tunnel would on, going fairly, but not quite straight into the side of the hill. The hill, as all the people for many miles around called it, and many little round doors opened out of it, first on one side and then another. No going upstairs for the hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of these. Wardrobes, he had whole rooms devoted to clothes. Kitchen, dining rooms, all were on the same floor, and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were all on the left-hand side going in, for these were the only ones to have windows. Deep set round windows looking over his garden and meadows beyond sloping down to the river. This was a very well-to-do hobbit, and his name was Baggins. The Bagginses had lived in the neighborhood of the hill for time and out of mind, and people considered them very respectable. Not only because most of them were rich, but also because they never had any adventures or did anything unexpected. You could tell what a Baggins would say on any question without the bother of asking him. This is a story of how a Baggins had an adventure and found himself doing and saying things altogether unexpected. He may have lost his neighbor's respect, but he gained, well, you will see what he gained in the end. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. I'm starting a new reading series alongside reading Warhammer and other novels I like, specifically some classic fantasy literature that is out of copyright. So I can read the whole thing in stages. And we're going to start with Tolkien's The Hobbit, a classic for the ages. Now, I know what some of you are going to say. The movie. This is part of the reason I want to do this, is there was a lot of backlash on Peter Jackson's The Hobbit movie, and I've seen the Rankin and Bass version. I've watched all the versions of The Hobbit that have ever existed, and I'm not anti the Peter Jackson version. He did take some liberties, but one must remember that visual media and written media are different forms of art. So what works in a book might not necessarily work on the screen. And yes, The Hobbit is a novel that's this big. However, if you pay attention to Tolkien's details, though there were liberties taken in the movie, a lot of points that happen in the movie did occur in the book. It's just that the book mentions them in a sentence that's this long, and the movie expands on that point. Because see here on the Ebony Otaku, we celebrate nerdity in all of its forms. I don't look at the multi-million-dollar production of a 3-part movie series of one of the greatest books to ever be written and go, oh, well, it wasn't done the way it should be, so it's not good enough. No. Thank you for your $200 million that made this movie that I get to enjoy. This series of movie. Thank you to the artisans, the actors, the professionals, the grips, the stunt people, the creators of sets and CGI. Thank you for endeavoring to bring this world that Tolkien created to life. That is no easy feat because Tolkien himself is pretty much a genius. Fun fact, when he began to endeavor to write about Middle Earth and the peoples and creatures that inhabited it, Tolkien was also a linguist and a professor of English as well. And he had created languages, Elvish being chief among those. He wrote the books around the languages he created. You can actually learn Elvish and 100% speak it, along with some other languages that are in Middle Earth that are completely unique to other spoken and written languages that are used by the peoples today. That's amazing. Can you imagine creating a language and then writing a book to go along with your language? That's a whole other level of creativity that most of us could never aspire to achieve. I also want to read through The Hobbit for my own gratification because it's a great book, but I want to share it with all of you just as we're sharing Warhammer, just as we're sharing the women's stories with the Asian authors that I love, just as we dive into English literature, because these are timeless stories that should be shared. And the great books should be read, but they're also great read aloud. And there's so many ways you can hear them read aloud. But a lot of the novels that I love, you never really hear a female voice reading them unless it's specifically a female story, which I guess is okay. But how we feel about characters, how we interact with them, how we connect with them, that can change depending on who's reading it. So I'm interested to see how you react to the characters, the setting, the world of The Hobbit as I read through. In sections, I am going to eventually read the entire book. It's not the longest book, but I'm going to try to get one of these videos up a week along with reading and discussing Warhammer. And if you like it, tell me, and I'll keep doing more of these. I might tackle the Silmarillion. Yeah, I'm thinking of doing Fuel's War. That's a series that my fiance introduced me to, and I'm enjoying it. And there are some others. So part of being in the nerdverse is understanding where all of this great stuff came from, and a lot of it started just in literature. So I love going back to the roots of the written word because the written word are words that stay. These are words that are going to be here forever. If someone's work was important enough to be written down so that it stays, so that generations upon generations can experience it, then that's something that should be shared. And I'm looking forward to celebrating not just the works of other authors that I love in sci fi, fantasy, and great stories of people, but also one of the great authors in English literature, one of my inspirations personally. So, without further ado, let's get back into The Hobbit. I will not be reading the entire first chapter today, but because it takes time to read all of these, I'm going to chunk it up. That way, people can experience it in stages as we go through the adventure. So, let's get back to it. The mother of our particular hobbit. What is a hobbit? I suppose hobbits need some description nowadays, since they have become rare and shy of the big people, as they call us. They are, or were, a little people about half our height and smaller than the bearded dwarves. Hobbits have no beards. There is little or no magic about them, except the ordinary, everyday sort, which helps them disappear quietly and quickly when large, stupid folk like you and me come blundering along, making a noise like elephants, which they can hear a half mile off. They are inclined to be fat in the stomach. They dress in bright colors, chiefly green or yellow, wear no shoes because their feet grow natural leathery soles and thick warm brown hair like the stuff on our heads, which is curly, have long clever brown fingers, good-natured faces, and laugh deep fruity laughs, especially after dinner, which they have twice a day when they can get it. Now, you know enough to go on with us. As I was saying, the mother of this hobbit, of Bilbo Baggins, that is, was the famous Belladonna Took, one of the three remarkable daughters of the old Took, head of the hobbits who lived across the water in the small river that ran at the foot of the hill. It was often said in other families that long ago one of the Took ancestors must have taken a fairy wife. That was, of course, absurd, but certainly there was still something not entirely hobbit like about them. Once in a while, members of the Took clan would go and have adventures. They discreetly disappeared, and the family hushed it up. But the fact remained that the Tooks were not as respectable as the Bagginses, though they were undoubtedly richer. Not that Belladonna Took ever had any adventures after she became Mrs. Bungo Baggins. Bungo, that was Bilbo's father, built the most luxurious hobbit hole for her, and partly with her money, that was to be found either under the hill or over the hill or across the water. And there they remained to the end of their days. Still, it is probable that Bilbo, her only son, although he looked and behaved exactly like a second edition of his solid and comfortable father, got something a bit queer in his makeup from the Took side. Something that only waited for a chance to come out. The chance never arrived until Bilbo Baggins was grown up. Being about 50 years old or so and living in the beautiful hobbit hole built by his father, which I have just described for you, until he had, in fact, apparently settled down immovably. By some curious chance one morning long ago in the quiet of the world, when there was less noise and more green, and the hobbits were still numerous and prosperous, Bilbo Baggins was standing at his door after breakfast, smoking an enormous long wooden pipe that reached nearly down to his woolly toes, neatly brushed. Gandalf came by. Gandalf. If you had heard only a quarter of what I've heard about him, and I've heard only very little of all there is to hear, you would be prepared for any sort of remarkable tale. Tales and adventures sprouted up all over the place wherever he went in the most extraordinary fashion. He had not been down that way under the hill for ages and ages, not since his friend, the old Took, died. In fact, the hobbits had almost forgotten what he looked like. He had been away over the hill and across the water on business of his own since they were small and hobbit boys and girls. All that the unsuspecting Bilbo saw that morning was an old man with a staff. He had a tall, pointed blue hat and a long gray cloak with a silver scarf over which hung his long white beard down to his waist and immense black boots. "Good morning," said Bilbo, and he meant it. The sun was shining, the grass was very green, but Gandalf looked at him from under the long, bushy eyebrows that stuck out further than the brim of his shady hat. "What do you mean?" he said. "Do you wish me a good morning, or mean that it is a morning that is good whether I want it or not? Or that you feel good on this morning? Or that it is a morning to be good on?" "All of them at once," said Bilbo. "A very fine morning for a pipe of tobacco outdoors, into the bargain. If you have a pipe about you, sit down and have a fill of mine. There's no hurry. We have all the day before us." Then Bilbo sat down on a seat by his door, crossed his legs, and blew out beautiful gray rings of smoke that sailed up to the air without breaking and floated away over the hill. Very pretty, said Gandalf. But I have no time to blow smoke rings this morning. I am looking for someone to share an adventure that I am arranging, and it is very difficult to find anyone. I should think so in these parts. We are plain quiet folk and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things make you late for dinner. I can't think of what anybody wants with them, said our Mr. Baggins, and stuck out one thumb behind his braces and blew an even bigger smoke ring. Then he took out his morning letters and began to read, pretending to take no more notice of the old man. He had decided that he was not quite his sort and wanted him to go away. But the old man did not move. He stood leaning on his stick and gazing at the hobbit without saying anything, till Bilbo got quite uncomfortable and even a little cross. "Good morning," he said at last. "We don't want any adventures here, thank you. You might try over the hill or across the water." By this he meant that the conversation was at an end. "What a lot of things you do use good morning for," said Gandalf. "Now, you mean that you want to get rid of me, and that it won't be a good morning until I move off." Not at all, my dear sir. Let me see, I don't think I know your name." Yes, my dear sir, and I do know your name, Mr. Bilbo Baggins, and you do know my name, though you don't remember that I belong to it. I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me. To think that I should have lived to be good-morninged by Belladonna Took's son, as if I was selling buttons at the door. Gandalf? Gandalf! Good gracious me, not the wandering wizard that gave old Took a pair of magic diamond studs that fastened themselves and never came undone till ordered. Not the fellow who used to tell such wonderful tales at parties about dragons and goblins and giants and the rescue of princesses and the unexpected luck of widows' sons. Not the man that used to make such particularly excellent fireworks. I remember those. Old Took used to have them on Midsummer's Eve. Splendid. They used to go up like great lilies and snapdragons and lanbrams of fire and hang in the twilight all evening. You will already notice that Mr. Baggins was not quite so prosy as he liked to believe. Also, he was very fond of flowers. "Dear me," he went on, "not the Gandalf who was responsible for so many quiet lads and lasses going off into the blue for mad adventures. Anything from climbing trees to visiting elves, or sailing ships, sailing to other shores. Bless me, life used to be quite you used to upset things badly in these parts once upon a time. I beg your pardon, but I had no idea you were still in business." "And where else should I be?" said the wizard. "All the same, I am pleased to find you remember something about me. You seem to remember my fireworks kindly, at any rate, and that is not without hope. Indeed, for your old grandfather Took's sake, and for the sake of poor Belladonna, your mother, I will give you what you asked for." "I beg your pardon, I haven't asked for anything." "Yes, you have, twice now. My pardon. I give it to you. In fact, I will go so far as to send you on this adventure. Very amusing for me, and very good for you, and profitable too, very likely, if you ever get over it. Sorry, I don't want any adventures, thank you. Not today, good morning, but please come to tea any time you like. Why not tomorrow? Come tomorrow. Goodbye." With that, the hobbit turned and scuttled inside his round green door, and shut it quickly as he dared, not to seem rude. Wizards, after all, are wizards. Why on earth did I ask him to tea for? He said to himself as he went into the pantry. He had only just had breakfast, but he thought of a cake or two and a drink of something would do him good after his fright. Gandalf, in the meantime, was still standing outside the door and laughing long but quietly. After a while, he stepped up and with the spike of his staff scratched a queer sign on the hobbit's beautiful green front door. Then he strode away, just about the time when Bilbo was finishing his second cake and beginning to think that he had escaped adventures very well. Nobody writes like Tolkien. Nobody writes like Tolkien. Beautiful. And just doing that opening, that's just a few paragraphs. He does such a good job setting up the world. We know who hobbits are. We know what they mean to Middle Earth. We know what their society is like. They're quiet folk. They don't want adventures. They just want to eat, drink, and be happy and die. That's all hobbits want to do. Doesn't sound like a bad life. There are no body issues in Hobbiton. You have as big a belly as you want, and you have 2 dinners. Who wants to be a hobbit? But that aside, we know who Bilbo is. We notice that he is so interested in who Gandalf is. He's grown up hearing the stories of his own 2 relatives who went on great adventures of young lads and lasses who disappeared to do amazing things. And secretly, quietly, inwardly, he wants to be one of them. He just doesn't know it yet. Because here's the thing about going on an adventure of taking a trek out into the unknown. It's unknown. Things might not go the way you want them to. Or you might be surprised and find that the greatest discovery of your life is waiting for you. But the only way to know is to take that first step out of the door. And I think that's why The Hobbit resonates. It's the story of leaving comfort and complacency. Bilbo doesn't have a bad life. The hobbits don't have a bad life. There is nothing wrong with a society that says you can have 2 dinners, a second breakfast, and eat cake at 10 in the morning because your nerves got disturbed. I resonate with hobbit culture. At the same time, there can be a thing as being too complacent. It's a big, wide world out there. I don't know about you, but I've told you about me. I've been privileged to travel all over the planet, and I have more travels planned. Some this summer, I'm going on the honeymoon, going out of the country for that. Next year, going to take a trip over to the Tokyo and Seoul. The year after that, be going to Iceland because there's going to be a showing of the Northern Lights that won't be seen again for 1,000 years. It's a big, wide world, and what understanding and experiencing the world allows us to do is erase prejudice. Because you notice how Tolkien starts out his work in explaining how these different peoples view hobbits and how hobbits view the big people. We're the big people. So, how do hobbits react to regular humans? And how do humans react to hobbits? There is a distinct separation of all of the different types of people that are in Middle Earth. There are humans, there are elves, dwarves, hobbits, but then we get into the more sinister creatures. You've got your orcs out there. But then what about the Nazgul, the denizens that live inside of, Mount Doom and the like? What about the wizards? What is a wizard and why are there only a handful of them? These are all questions that have to be answered, but these are all peoples that don't really involve themselves with one another. They don't know much about each other. And because of that, they don't realize that there are points of view and experiences out there that aren't their own. And those points of view and experiences are valid. When you have the chance, experience more of the world. Nothing combats prejudice and small-mindedness like travel, like experiencing people in other places. The more I've been able to get out of my own comfortable world, and I like my world. I like my Sailor Moon hoodies. I like my action figures. I like my computer. I like my house. I like my food. I like my dog who is asleep next to me. I like all my friends and where I work. I love all of that. I also love experiencing life with people who don't have the kind of life I have and seeing what makes them have joy. How do they create community? How do their children grow up and find purpose in life? I enjoy experiencing the food of other places. Nothing brings people together like food. And I have eaten some incredible dishes across this planet. The greatest expressions of culture come in writing, song, and food. And when you get to experience those things all together at once, it gets real hard to hate people that aren't like you simply because they don't look like you. I love that Tolkien slowly builds his stories so that we understand the history of who all these peoples are, how they came to be in the types of societies they're in, and what happened when those societies started to open up and experience one another, to have adventures. Because no one knows it yet, but there's going to come a day when the smallest people of Middle Earth are going to be the ones to save Middle Earth. So let me know down in the comments what you think of this new reading series, going through The Hobbit. And once I finish that, the rest of his works are out of copyright too, except for the newly published version. So we might go there as well. Those will take a long time to read because the books are huge, but I love it. Thank you all who have commented, subscribed. Views are going up, subscriptions are going up. I really appreciate it because I'm enjoying doing this. I'm enjoying interacting, learning about new works, hearing your thoughts about the things that we are reading, experiencing, and reviewing. And just, being part of this great community of nerdity that is out there in the world. We are almost at 500 on YouTube, so once we get there, I will pick the first subscriber to receive a said nerdy prize. I have so much that I can give away because Homegirl's got to move in a few months, so a few things have got to go. So once we reach that first 500 on YouTube, first prize go out. And then, of course, the Instagram, the Ebony Otaku, and the Twitter or Facebook. Once one of those reach 500, there's 2 more prizes out there that I want to give away. I'm going to think of something special for when we hit 1,000 and then milestones beyond. But even to have hit this little milestone, it's a big deal because you don't have to come here. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to click on my channel, but you did. So welcome to the Nerdverse. I hope you're enjoying it, and let's keep enjoying nerdity together. I will see you in the next one.